Hello students, my name is Rohit and I will be teacher of Indian polity. And I have been teaching this subject for the past 9 to 10 years. So, in Indian polity, the first important thing is to understand what is the meaning of the word polity. The word polity stands for political system and we are studying Indian polity. So it basically means Indian political system. Now a basic question comes in mind, and that is for how we will get the idea of Indian political system. And the answer is quite simple. We will get to know the idea of Indian political system in our Indian constitution. So in short, we are dealing with Indian constitution. So whenever students ask that what we are studying in Indian polity, I simply say that we are going to study the Indian constitution because in Indian constitution, you will understand the Indian political system. So without ado, we should start with the new chapter, and this is the preamble of the constitution. So the first chapter that we are going to discuss is the preamble. Now the basic question that comes in mind, that why we are starting with preamble, and the answer is simple. The preamble is the introduction to the constitution. So if we want to study the constitution, then we must have a proper understanding of its introduction, and preamble is the introduction to the constitution. So now before we start with this topic, let us first understand that how we are going to approach. See, in this chapter, we will study two kind of things. The first will be the questions related to the periphery of preamble. It means, see, in our examination, two kind of question comes. First is the area related to preamble. For example, what is the history of preamble? What is the significance of preamble? Whether preamble is a part of the constitution, whether it can be amended. So, first kind of question will be this, where we will study the history, significance, importance of preamble. And the second kind of question will be the core preamble, that what are the objectives in the preamble. These all things will be discussed in the word preamble. So first we will study the history of preamble. Okay, so the first thing that we should understand is that what is the history of preamble, and the answer is simple. In history we will study two important things. The first will be that which was the first country which started with preamble, and the answer is USA. USA is the first country which began with preamble. So the first point that we should remember is which country started with preamble, and it was USA. The second thing that we should remember is from where we have taken inspiration when it comes to preamble. So in case of preamble, we have taken inspiration from USA. So suppose question comes in examination that we have taken inspiration from which country in respect of preamble. The answer is the USA, United States of India. So when it comes to inspiration, we have taken inspiration from USA. So in history, we need to understand these two things. First, which was the first country, and the second, from where we have taken inspiration when it comes to preamble. One more thing when it comes to history, and it is that in our context, what is the history of preamble? See, on 13th of December 1946, on this day, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru introduced objective resolution in the Constituent Assembly. I hope you all understand that when it comes to the Indian Constitution was made by the Constituent Assembly. Many of you have this doubt that Indian Constitution was made by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. No doubt, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is known as the father of Indian Constitution because of his contribution. But when it comes to that who made Indian Constitution, then the answer should be the Constituent Assembly. So the Constituent Assembly met for the first time on 9th of December 1946, and on 13th December 1946, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru introduced objective resolution in the Constituent Assembly. And remember, this objective resolution was later on converted into the preamble. So can we argue that the preamble is a modified version of objective resolution? Yes, we should remember this point because this is important from examination perspective. So the third point that we have to remember is simple, that the Indian preamble is a modified version of objective resolution, and objective resolution was introduced by Pandit Nehru on 13th of December 1946. Now, what is objective resolution all about? Objective resolution basically deals with that what is the objective of Indian Constitution. See, we are making the Indian Constitution, and whenever we make something, we make with certain objective. So what is the objective behind framing Indian Constitution? So the objective was contained in this resolution called as objective resolution. We'll be discussing objective resolution after some time in a new chapter that will be making of the constitution. But today we have started with preamble. Okay, so when it comes to history, you just remember these three things. The first is, which was the first country to start with preamble? The second thing, that from where we have taken inspiration. And the third is, what is objective resolution and what is its relation with the preamble? Simple. Preamble is a modified version of objective resolution. So I hope the history is complete. See, from our examination, we all need to understand this thing. Okay. Now, moving on further. Okay. So moving further, now we will start with the meaning of the word preamble. So after history, we will study meaning. So, what is the meaning of the word preamble? Very simple. The preamble stands for introduction. So, what is the meaning of the word preamble? Introduction. And we are studying preamble of the Indian Constitution. So, basically we are studying introduction of the Indian Constitution. So, can I say that the Indian preamble means introduction to the Constitution? Yes. So, preamble means introduction of the Constitution. Second, when we will be studying the introduction of the Constitution, what we will get to know? What is contained in this introduction? The answer is simple. In this introduction, we will deal with the summary of the Indian Constitution. So, preamble is the introduction of the Constitution, and in this introduction, we will see the summary of the Constitution, or in other words, essence of the Constitution. So, preamble contains summary of the Constitution. You can also say the essence of the Constitution. So, when it comes to meaning, we have to understand these two things. The first is, what is the meaning of the word preamble? And second, what preamble contains? Preamble contains the essence of the Constitution, summary of the Constitution, and it basically means introduction of the Constitution. And that's why we have started with the chapter preamble. So we are done with history, then meaning, and now third, what is the status of preamble? Okay, so what is the status of preamble? Okay, so the status of preamble is that it is non-justiciable. Now, what is non-justiciable? Okay, if you have to understand what is non-justiciable, you first understand what is justiciable. Okay, justiciable means which can be enforced by the court of law. So, suppose a particular provision of the Constitution is violated, then in this case you will approach judiciary. And if the judiciary is able to enforce that provision, then we can say, yes, that particular provision is justiciable. So, justiciable means which can be enforced by the court of law. So, non-justiciable means which cannot be enforced by court of law. Okay, let me give you an example. Let us take, for example, fundamental rights. We all have fundamental rights. Indian Constitution gives us fundamental rights. Okay, so now suppose our fundamental rights are violated. What will happen in this case? We will approach judiciary, and judiciary will enforce our fundamental rights. So whenever judiciary enforce, we can call it as justiciable, but the preamble is non-justiciable. So it means that if a particular provision of Indian preamble is violated, then you cannot approach the court, or the court cannot enforce that particular provision. So that is why it is called as non-justiciable. So I hope this particular thing is clear, that non-justiciable means which cannot be enforced by the court of law. So I hope the word non-justiciable is clear. And for justiciable, we have fundamental rights. So suppose if someone asks that what is meant by justiciable, and can you give the example? Yes, we can say that fundamental rights are justiciable. In case of the violation, we can approach judiciary, and judiciary will enforce our fundamental rights. Hence, they are justiciable. Okay, so the preamble is non-justiciable, which cannot be enforced by the court of law. Okay, now further. After status, let us understand the significance of preamble. So what is the significance of preamble? Okay, so here we will study what great personalities have said about preamble. Okay, let us start with a great lawyer, N.A. Palkhiwala. Okay, N.A. Palkhiwala. For N.A. Palkhiwala, Indian preamble is identity card of the Constitution. Identity card of the Constitution. See, N.A. Palkhiwala was a great lawyer, and for him, the Indian preamble is the identity card of the Constitution. So this shows the significance of preamble. That such a great personality is saying that the Indian Constitution, sorry, the great personality is saying that the preamble is the identity card of the Constitution. This shows the importance of preamble. Okay, second, there's one more person, and his name is Ernest Barker. He is a political scientist. And for Ernest Barker, the preamble is keynote of the Constitution. Now, this is very important for examination, that which can be considered as the keynote of the Constitution. Suppose this kind of question comes in the examination, that among the following options, which can be considered as the keynote of the Constitution? So the answer is preamble. And who said that it is the keynote of the Constitution? The answer is Ernest Barker. Now, moving further, after N.A. Palkhiwala and Ernest Barker, there are many more, but we will deal only with those who are important. The third is Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Sorry, not Rajendra Prasad, it should be K.M. Munshi. So, for K.M. Munshi, the preamble is, okay, let me start with another slide. So, because it will be clearly visible. K.M. Munshi. So for K.M. Munshi, what is preamble? What is the significance of preamble? It is the horoscope of our sovereign, democratic republic. So K.M. Munshi said this about the preamble, that it is the horoscope of our sovereign democratic republic. And if you're not able to understand the meaning of the word sovereign, do not worry. When we'll start with the core preamble, there we will discuss that what exactly is the meaning of the word the sovereign. Okay, so you should not be worried about it. Okay, so when it comes to significance, I think this is important. But there's one more thing, and that is the Supreme Court. Yes, now it is not about an individual, it is about the Supreme Court. Supreme Court in 1960 said something very important about preamble. Now listen, there was a case. The case is Berubari Union case of 1960. Now in this case, Supreme Court said something very important about preamble, and it was that preamble is something which crucial for the preamble is really important for Indian Constitution. Supreme Court said in this case that preamble is not a part of the Constitution. On one side, preamble is the mind of the makers of the Constitution. See, if we have to understand that what was the purpose behind making this Constitution, then we need to understand the mind of the makers of the Constitution. And in order to understand the minds of the makers of the Constitution, we require a key with which we can open the minds of those who have made this Constitution. So for Supreme Court, the preamble is like a key. With this key, we can open the minds of the makers of the Constitution. Key to the minds of the makers of the Constitution. Now, this is very important, and many times it has been asked in the examination that which among the following is a key to open the minds of the makers of the constitution? And the answer is the preamble. One more question. In which case Supreme Court said that preamble is a key to the minds of makers of the constitution? And again, the answer is Behru-Bari Union case of 1960. We will deal with this case in a separate chapter, that is the part 1 of the constitution. Under article 3, we will be discussing the Behru-Bari Union case. Okay. So in Behru-Bari Union case, Supreme Court said that preamble is a key to open the minds of the makers of the constitution. Okay. So what we have discussed so far is the history, meaning, status and significance of preamble. Now we will deal with a very important thing, and that is whether preamble is a part of the constitution or not. Okay. So now we have to understand that whether preamble is a part of the constitution or not. Okay. Let me write this question. Whether preamble is a part of the constitution, whether preamble is a part of the constitution. Now, the answer to this question cannot be yes or no. We have to understand this question in context of the judgment of Supreme Court. So, this question was asked for the first time in Behru-Bari Union case. So, in this case, which we discussed recently, in Behru-Bari Union case 1960, this question was raised for the first time, and it was asked from Supreme Court that whether preamble is a part of the constitution or not. So Supreme Court said two important things about preamble. The first was that yes, preamble is really important because it is like a key with which we can open the minds of the makers of the constitution. But on the other hand, the Supreme Court denied that preamble is a part of the constitution. So in this case, Supreme Court denied that yes, preamble is not a part of the constitution, but it is important because it is like a key to open the minds of the makers of the constitution. So what Supreme Court said in Behru-Bari Union case, the Supreme Court said that preamble is not a part of the constitution, not a part of the constitution. Okay. So this is in Behru-Bari Union case what Supreme Court said about preamble. Now after 13 years, in a different case, and the case is the most important case in Indian history, and it is Kesvananda Bharti case 1973. So the same question was asked from the Supreme Court after 13 years. In 1960, Supreme Court said that yes, it is not a part of the constitution, but after 13 years, the same question was asked again. And in this case, Supreme Court overturned its previous judgment. In this case, Supreme Court accepted that yes, preamble is a part of the constitution. So what Supreme Court said? So what Supreme Court said in Kesvananda Bharti case, that preamble is a part of the constitution. So now suppose if this question comes in the examination that whether preamble is a part of the constitution or not, then you have to be simple. The answer is yes. We will stick to this judgment. Okay. But if the question specifically asks that in which case Supreme Court said that preamble is not a part of the constitution, then you have to say it is Behru-Bari Union. But if the question is whether preamble is a part of the constitution, you have to simply say yes, it is a part of the constitution. And in which case? Kesvananda Bharti case. But there is one more case related to this, and it is LIC Union case. Okay, it is LIC Union case. Now in LIC Union case, the Supreme Court said that preamble is an integral part of the constitution. Preamble is an integral part of the constitution. Okay, so we have to remember three important cases. The first is Behru-Bari Union case, second is Keswan Bharti case, and the third is LIC Union case. Okay, so finally we got the answer. That is, preamble is a part of the constitution. Now, if preamble is the part of the constitution, then one more question, and that is whether we can amend the preamble. See, our Indian constitution is a written constitution. And like any other written constitution, Indian constitution also contains a procedure to amend its provision. The entire constitution cannot be changed, but its provision can be changed to some extent. So the question is, if we can amend the provisions of the constitution, then can we amend the preamble? See, now preamble is a part of the constitution. So is it possible to amend the preamble? So this question was asked from Supreme Court in the same case, case 1 and the Bharti case. See, in Behru-Bari Union case, Supreme Court said that preamble is not a part of the constitution. So no one asked that whether we can amend the preamble or not. But in case 1 Bharti case, Supreme Court said that preamble is a part of the constitution. So now obviously the question comes, and it is whether preamble can be amended like any other part of the constitution. So let us understand the second question, and the second question is whether preamble can be amended. Whether preamble can be amended. Okay. So, is it possible to amend the preamble? So, what Supreme Court said in this case? So, this question was asked from Supreme Court in which case? Case 1 and the Bharti case, because in this case Supreme Court accepted that preamble is a part of the constitution. So, in this case, what Supreme Court said? In this case, Supreme Court said that yes, it is possible to amend the preamble like any other part of the constitution. So, the answer is simple. Yes, we can amend the preamble. Yes, the preamble can be amended. But one more thing, there are different methods to amend the constitution. The first is by simple majority. We will discuss after some time that what is meant by majority, simple majority, special majority, effective majority, absolute majority. But for basic understanding, Supreme Court said that yes, we can amend the preamble. But now the question comes, how to amend the preamble? There are different ways to amend the constitution. We can amend the constitution by simple majority. We can amend the constitution by special majority. So which majority should be applied while amending the preamble? So in this case, Supreme Court clarified that yes, we can amend the constitution. We can amend the preamble, and for amending the preamble, you should require the special majority, which is contained under Article 368 of the Constitution. So according to Supreme Court, we can amend the preamble, and for amending the preamble, we require the procedure contained under Article 368. So if someone asks that what is Article 368, we can say that Article 368 contains the procedure to amend the constitution, and the same procedure should be applied while amending the preamble. So we cannot amend the preamble by simple majority. Simple majority is not required for amending the preamble. It is required for making simple changes in the constitution. For example, when we will study Article 2, Article 3, in these articles, simple majority is required for amending the provision. But when it comes to the preamble, we are supposed to use Article 368, which contains a special majority. So finally, we got the answer. The question was whether preamble can be amended. So this question was asked for the first time in case 1 and Bharti case. And this says Supreme Court said that yes, we can amend the preamble, and for amending the preamble, we need a special majority contained under Article 368. So we can simply say that preamble can be amended under Article 368. Now one more question. If preamble can be amended, so whether this happened? So the preamble has been amended only once, and it was by 42nd Amendment Act 1976 during Indira Gandhi government. So during Indira Gandhi government, the preamble was amended for the first time. So the preamble has been amended only once, and it was amended by the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976. Here CAA means Constitutional Amendment Act. So 42nd Amendment Act was passed during emergency. At that time, opposition was behind the bars. So this was passed by Indira Gandhi government. and by the 42 Amendment Act. Now let me tell you one more important thing about 42 Amendment Act. And 42 Amendment Act is also known as the mini constitution. What is meant by mini constitution? See, by the 42 Amendment Act, lot of amendments were done or were made to the various parts of the constitution. So various parts of the constitution, various provisions of the constitution were amended by the same amendment, 42 Amendment Act 1976. Because of this amendment, lot of changes were introduced in the constitution, and that is why we call it as the mini constitution. So by the 42 Amendment Act, the preamble was amended. And what was the amendment? So 3 new words were added to the preamble. 3 new words were added to the preamble, and these 3 words were, see, the first is socialist, the second is secular, and third is integrity. Now, this is important for examination. The question can be like this. How many words were added by 42nd Amendment Act 1976? Answer is 3. Which among the following words were not added by 42nd Amendment Act? Or the question can be like this, that what original preamble contained? So original preamble did not contain these 3 words. Okay. So these 3 words were added by 42nd Amendment Act 1976. And to this date, only one amendment has been made to the preamble, and it is this. Okay. So after this, now we should start with the core preamble. See, we discussed earlier that in this chapter, we are going to discuss 2 important things. The first is the area related to preamble, and it was the history, significance, its status, whether it's part of the preamble or whether it's part of the constitution or not, whether it can be amended or not. So we have discussed this. And now we will discuss the core part of the preamble, what exactly preamble is about. So when it comes to preamble, I'm very sure that you all must have read preamble. See, you all must have read NCERTs, and in the first or the second page of NCERT, you should have seen the preamble contained written inside a box. It starts with, "We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic." So preamble begins like this. So now we have to understand this entire preamble, that what it deals with, what is the objective of the constitution contained in the preamble, what is the date mentioned in the preamble. We'll be discussing this. Okay, so when it comes to preamble, we need to understand 4 important things. Okay, now we are dealing with the second part of the preamble, and it is the core preamble, what is written inside the preamble. So we will discuss the ingredients of the preamble, what preamble contains. So we will study these 4 headings. The first is the okay. So the first is the source of authority of the constitution. Source of authority of the constitution. See, we are discussing the ingredients of the preamble, and there are total 4 ingredients of the preamble. The first is the source of the authority of the constitution. The second is nature of Indian state. Nature of Indian state. Third is objectives of the constitution. Objectives of the constitution. And the fourth is date mentioned in the preamble. Date mentioned in the preamble. Okay, but we will start with source of authority of the constitution and date mentioned in the preamble, because the answer is one line. So first we will discuss the source of authority and the date mentioned in the preamble, and then we will start with the nature of Indian state and objective of the constitution. So what is the source of authority of the constitution? How preamble begins? The preamble begins, "We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a." So how preamble begins? It begins, "We, the people of India, So here the people of India, here the people of India is the answer to this point. That is the source of authority of the constitution. So from where a constitution gets its authority? Everyone in this country respect Indian constitution. They have certain amount of respect for the Indian constitution. So why they have respect for the Indian constitution? Because the Indian constitution derives its authority from the people of India. And preamble also starts that we the people of India. So the constitution derives its authority from the people of India. So the answer is simple. What is the source of authority of the constitution? It is the people of India. Now, again, simple. Which date is mentioned in the preamble? So let me ask a simple question. That on which day Indian constitution was written? On which day the task of framing the constitution was over? It is 26th of November 1949. On this day, Indian constitution was completed. So on which day Indian constitution was over? On 26th November 1949. The same date is mentioned in the preamble. So which date is mentioned in the preamble? The same day on which the Indian constitution was over. It was 26th of November 1949. So we got the answer. The first was source of authority of the constitution, and the second was the date mentioned in the preamble, and finally we got the answer. Now we can start with the nature of Indian state. So what is the nature of Indian state? Let us again start with preamble. How preamble begins? We the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. These 5 words are the answer to this nature of Indian state. What is the nature of Indian state? What is the nature of Indian polity? These 5 words. And these 5 words are sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, republic. So this is the nature of Indian state according to preamble. We are sovereign, we are socialist, secular, democratic, republic. But we need to understand each and every word. So first we will begin with the most difficult one, and it is sovereign. So what is sovereign? So first we will start with sovereign. So the word sovereign implies that there is something supreme, or I should say supreme power. So the word sovereign means supreme power or supreme authority. There is no authority above this authority, and that is why this authority is known as the supreme authority. So the word sovereign means supreme authority. So when we say India is a sovereign country, we basically want to say that India is a supreme power. There is no other power above India. Before 1947, we were ruled by the Britishers. At that time, India was not a sovereign country because India was under the British rule. So Britain was the supreme power, and we were under the Britain. So we cannot say that India was a supreme power at the time of Britishers. We became sovereign only after the Indian Constitution was written. So we became sovereign only when Britishers left India and we wrote the constitution. Now we are a supreme power. It simply means that. Okay.